Welcome to the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez.
And I'm Ed Lingao. It's been an interesting 6 months for President Marcos and the whole country after the May elections.
Oh, definitely, yes. So many things have happened actually. Nag-short-term memory loss ako, di ba? When you think about
Parang
it.
sunod-sunod.
Oo, kasi ang dami. So,
Hindi, umpisahan mo dun sa natanggal kagad yung kanyang executive secretary.
Okay. No? That was a
Unexpected
shock
John.
to us.
Diba?
Oo.
Considering na he was very active in the campaign.
Exactly.
But all of that was also backdropped by, di ba, at the start they identified 3 crises. Di ba? The health crisis, which was continuing, hopefully we exit from that. And then jobs, the economy essentially. Pagkatapos food.
Yes.
Food prices and yan, heading into
Lahat na,
Christmas, ito pa rin ang pinag-uusapan natin.
Ano yung list na na-anticipate nila? Food?
Well,
Kasi yung shortages di ba? I mean, look at the sugar importation, di ba? Na nauwi nga sa,
Yes.
sa resignation.
Saka, remember, pati yung
mga sibuyas, I mean, who would have thought, di ba ngayon, it's a running joke
pati
na, di
yung
ba?
potato, di
Oo,
ba?
pati
Wala
patat.
ng
wala ba natanggap sa exchange
potato.
gift?
Sibuyas. Maiiyak ka talaga ngayon
Hindi
sa
pwede.
presyo.
Kasi may price limit yung hindi gasa.
Saka remember, nakulangan din ng chicken.
Oo,
What's the
yeah.
problem?
Yes.
Puro food
But I hindi ko alam. It's a hard question to answer in a way. But at the same time, I think one of the things that one would have thought they would have anticipated at least better was essentially how difficult running government is going to be. And to that point, di ba, parang you still have a lot of things that people are still asking. Parang wala pa rin tayong permanent health secretary. Wala pa rin tayong, I mean, the agriculture portfolio is still with the president. Diba? These are
Although may binanggit sila na parang sinasave yung ibang positions for some of those who lost in the elections.
Exactly.
Diba?
So,
1
kailan
year.
yun?
Yeah, but that's
Year.
not, yes, but that
June
is
pa
not
yun.
new to
Matagal.
any
Oo.
government. Every
Right.
government, we talk about that. And at the very least, with every government, there will be a clear OIC and malinaw na, in this case, parang hindi mo rin alam what the direction and the signaling is with regards to those particular two departments, di ba?
Oo. But to be fair, no? Parang ano naman siya, kung ano yung, sabihin na natin, shortfall niya doon sa mga areas ng appointments, parang full swing naman siya sa travel, no? Nakailang biyahe. Oo, di ba?
Hindi mo na mabilang.
And so many to come, di ba? In
And
the
ang
next year.
destinations niya, yung
Yung
mga never na hindi
Exactly
pinunta
like
Yung mga iniwasan.
ng
Brussels.
predecessor. European Union, the US. Diba?
Yes.
And to that point, significant din yung I don't know if you'd call it reversals pero at least yung pullback from the
Yes.
previous
A
administration.
tempering.
A tempering
Right.
from previous administration's policies, from the drug war,
Especially the drug
to
war.
treatment of
Yes.
journalists,
Yes.
to relations with the EU and the US, among other things.
Saka nag-soften siya sa mainstream media, di ba? Kasama
Oo.
na niya sa aeroplano.
Exactly, nagpapa-interview na, di ba? Mas
Nagpapa-interview,
open
very
na siya
casual.
ngayon. Siguro nag-warm up lang talaga at the start.
Pero gaya nga sabi nyo, ang dami nating napag-usapan. We've actually done a lot of episodes on President Bongbong Marcos this year. Here is a recap of those insightful interviews from his inaugural speech, the State of the Nation address, to his first 100 days in office, among other things.
I think he laid out the vision for the next 6 years quite well. It was a very good inaugural speech, in fairness, and it was it touched on almost all areas that he wanted to focus on, except for I think among all the presidents, it's a staple in inaugural speeches. But this particular speech, you saw the absence of the fight against corruption. Number one. Number two, I think peripherally, he didn't mention foreign policy. He mentioned Ukraine only in the aspect of the economy. So those are the two noticeable aspects where I felt that the president, I think, intentionally did not mention anything. Kasi I think it would in terms of the corruption issue, I think it would taint the nice inaugural speech. I think in and of itself, the speech itself has set a high bar for him, given that his focus will be on economic recovery. He will better the economy. Given the global recession that we're in, the high fuel prices, the 13 trillion debt, So you'd wonder, it is really a high bar that he has set himself to perform.
Mr. Lacerda, very quickly lang, something that you said, because you've been involved in a lot of presidential speeches, that's safe to presume. When it's a speech as big as this and as important as this, is it safe to say that there are no accidental, misplacements of words, and that every single word has a reason for being there, and every word that is not there has a reason for not being there?
That's correct. I think that's the focus of the inaugural speech. The fundamental speech is the inaugural, where you see him the president-elect laying down his vision for his governance. And you're correct. If he didn't mention corruption, there is a reason for doing so. If he didn't mention foreign policy, there has to be a reason for doing so. Sensitivity towards our Chinese friends, and a number of reasons why. But I think he wanted to focus on the things that bind us together, rather than things that might put his theme of unity asunder. So that's one basic thing I think I saw from the speech of President Bongbong Marcos.
Pero generally, you find it a well-crafted speech.
Maganda ang
Sabi mo,
lahat.
it's good.
Yeah.
And what about his
Maganda.
delivery? Anong tingin nyo? Because we rarely hear him speak eh. What do you think of the delivery this time?
Ano yung delivery niya? Naalala mo tayo, laki tayo ng martial law eh. So yung delivery niya, parang the way that he delivered is the way that his father delivered it. Eh. Yung the pauses, the diction, and the intersperse of English and Filipino. Talagang, I was having deja vu na parang yung tatay ang nagsasalita. Yung ganung klaseng imagery na which our younger generation never had experience of listening to President Marcos speak, no?
Yeah.
So that came to fore, and he was really to a certain degree following on the footsteps of his dad, Ferdinand Marcos, in terms of delivery. So talagang sa akin naalala ko yung that's the way McCoy did it before.
Pero sir, why would the president not mention corruption as an issue, given the fact that it's such a big issue for many Filipinos? I mean, of course, gut issue yung pagkain, but one way of addressing the food issue and the funding issue is through corruption, and I suppose we can all get together behind that.
Yes, but you get together, for those who are anti-Marcos, you'll get together in bashing him. Sabi mo, how can you be credible if you've never answered the issues of corruption? And you've always, and tama rin sabi ni Lucci, by the way, he said, very selective amnesia he's asking us to do selective amnesia. He's saying, let's move on, and then he mentions accomplishments of the father. So ano ba talaga? So, you stand on your own achievements. So you're charting your own legacy. You have nothing to speak of. So if you ask us to move on about his corruption and all other issues, then forget about the accomplishments of your dad. I mean, rice self-sufficiency happened only in the 70s. By 1980s, wala na rin siya. So it's true that we attained rice self-sufficiency in about 2 years, and we exported rice in 2 years. So, but other than that, we're now back to, is he going to do rice self-sufficiency when we know that, for instance, the cost of rice production in the Philippines is much, much higher than the cost of production in Vietnam and Malaysia? And by the way, he mentioned that maybe we should be buying things from abroad where it's cheaper rather than to produce, it's cheaper to buy.
Right.
He mentioned that.
Yes.
So
Sinabi
that's
siyang ganun.
reference
Alam mo,
to rice self-sufficiency.
you know what also struck me, was he kept referring to the one man, the only man who delivered when there were other presidents. I was wondering, ano kaya nararamdaman nila President Gloria?
Na nandun, si FDR was also there, I think.
I think it's the moment of glory, Lucci. I think it's you're in the stage right now, so you can make some crowing. Unfortunately,
Yes.
we're not the fact checkers, and that also, if you mention corruption, Ed, if a fact check yan, sigurado. So talagang it's better not to talk about corruption now. It's more important for you. And given the nice speech that was laid out, the vision that he showed to us, then you have to walk the talk now. So we'll be looking at the 6 years that how he will conduct himself in governance.
Yeah. Also joining us tonight in our discussion is political science professor Dr. Edmund Tayo. Sir, magandang gabi and welcome to the Chiefs. Welcome back.
Magandang gabi, sir.
Good evening.
Yes, sir. Sir, we were talking about yung mga napag-usapan at mga hindi pinag-usapan doon sa inaugural address. Kayo po, ano yung napansin ninyong o hinanapin nyo na sana'y napag-usapan, kumbaga? Let's start off with that.
Alam mo, ang papel ko naman, Ed, palagi yung optimistic view eh. No? So, tingnan muna natin doon sa more optimistic view. Unang-una, sinabi naman niya no, na lalagyan niya ng detalye ito sa kanyang State of the Nation address. This was clearly mentioned no, in his inaugural speech. Now, corruption, of course, was not mentioned as a specific issue. No? Albeit, he mentioned that there were so many mistakes that were done before, no, that which he vowed, no, that it will be at the very least reviewed, and that instead of finding fault, at least that's how I understood it, he will build on no, some of the milestones or some of those that have been accomplished. So siguro, I couldn't agree more na medyo prickly kasi itong issue ng corruption, no? So tama din na the inaugural speech is not only intended to set the tone of the policy direction of an administration, but also to enjoin no everyone. It's supposed to be really a feel-good speech, no? It's intentionally wanting to draw support no from everyone.
Yeah,
Yes.
to that point, something that Edwin Lacerda said, acknowledged kanina, no, there are no accidents in the speech. Everything is vetted, every single word. I found it interesting, Lucy and I, we were talking about it earlier, that when he made reference to how we teach and things that are, has to be rethought. I think I got that right. He didn't say rethought. He said
That's right.
that has to be rethought. But, so that made us sit up now. Okay, here it comes with the Department of Education Secretary Sara Duterte. But his first word after that was, I'm not talking about history.
Exactly.
Diba? I'm talking about STEM, I'm talking about engineering, I'm talking about English, things that will make us more competitive. Did you take note of that? I mean, was that a deliberate attempt to try to head off any criticism about historical revisionism, or am I just reading too much into this?
Well, I will agree to some extent in the sense that it was really intended to emphasize that we have to go back in time, learn from it, but to change any of it in the first place, it's not something that you can change. But in the case of education, particularly in education, because that's the context that which he mentioned, going back in time. Ang sinabi naman niya is, and I think I'm quoting it close to the original, is practical know-how. So, more on science, more on math. Ang segoy niya na is to expand opportunities for the Filipinos, not only for OFWs, but also here in the country. No? So, I'm inclined to think that really it is consistent with the first, statement that he mentioned. At the outset, he said, I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm here to talk about our future. No? So, yun ang tingin ko no, na direction ng kanyang inaugural speech.
Ang kapansin-pansin din dun sa speech niya earlier was he kept using the word listen. No, first he said that during the campaign he had the opportunity to listen. No, tapos and then later he repeated it twice. No, to listen, and you get the sense that he was saying that during the campaign he decided not to be aggressive toward the rivals, no? Not his words exactly, no? But instead, he was saying something like, there's really not much difference between what they're saying and what I said, but nothing, he didn't find anything incompatible with them, no? What do you think of that? I got the sense that he was kind of like explaining why he didn't appear in the debates, why he chose to just be away from the media or evasive. Anong thoughts mo doon?
Alam mo, binanggit niya yan, na sinabi naman niya na pinili niya yung kung kailan siya magsasalita, kung sino ang pupuntahan niya at ano ang mga sasagutin niya. Pero yung mga atake sa kanya, definitely binanggit niya, hindi niya talaga sinagot ito, no? Pero meron siyang siguro it's also a way of trying not to be negative, no? Kaya ang sinabi lang niya, he did not, I already forgot the exact words, no? But he's saying that he did not attack anyone, no, because he wanted to listen, and he was listening not so much because of the criticism, no, that's directed to him, but so much because he wanted to find out whether what he thought of doing, if ever elected, would be similar. In other words, if the plans and if the platforms of the other candidates, no, were somewhat similar or at the very least comparable to his. At yun yung sinasabi niya na hindi naman ganon, hindi disagreeable o hindi iba doon sa iniisip ng iba. In other words, it seems that the common thing is recovery. At least that's how I thought that he wanted to convey, no?
And unity, I think, no, yun ang kanyang pinupush eh. He was moving toward a call to unity nga, no?
Paulit-ulit. Yes. He mentioned pagkakaisa at least 3 times, if I'm not mistaken. At yung pangarap mo ay pangarap ko. So it's a way to say, what I'm going to do is something that will be consistent to what you guys want, no? It's as if saying that.
So, Mr. Lacerda, paulit-ulit nga yan, unity, unity, unity. I'm sure it's better than kill, 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 no? Apart from the inspiring tone of the speech, no? Kumusta naman yung sincerity? I'm asking you as you being a member of the opposition or being identified anyway with the opposition, you think it's sincere, and how do you think the opposition will react to that call for unity?
I think, Anna, you have to give him, because this is his inaugural speech and there is really no track record to speak of. So you give him the benefit of the doubt. That's why you have to a large degree that 100 days honeymoon applies also to people from all walks of life. No? So you judge him according to what he has laid down. You will judge him again on the persona that he will be doing come July. And so overall you see, and that's why he will be judged according to the standard that he imposed on himself. So that's the bar that we measure him against. That's the metric that we impose on him. Because he asked us he delivered it to us and informed us, this is my vision, and you will be judged in accordance to the vision that I laid out. In the same way that he was saying about listening, does that mean, for instance, I look at it basically from the point of view of media. Will media be allowed to do criticism? Because there's a difference in campaigning. You can avoid being interviewed in a campaign, but you cannot not be interviewed when you're in government, because you are supposed to inform the public. Now, is he going to skirt the line from media and go straight to the people through his vloggers? So that's a question. But in fact, I think you should hold him into account when he says that I'm going to listen to you, because the loudest megaphone of criticism will be coming from those who speak truth to power, and that is the fourth estate.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the Republic of the Philippines, His Excellency Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr.
On the part of the Senate, the joint session is called to order. on the House, part of the House of Representatives. The joint session is called to order.
I come before you today to address you as it is my duty as President of the Republic. We live in difficult times, brought about by some forces of our own making, but certainly also by forces that are beyond our control. We have assembled the best Filipino minds to help navigate us to this global crisis that we are now facing. We will endure. I know this in my mind. I know it in my heart. I know it in my very soul. The state of the nation is sound.
The president tried to define his agenda. That has been what people have been asking after the campaign, after the inauguration. So the SONA was used for that purpose of defining plans. Started with ways to deal with economic consequence of 2 years of pandemic, how to deal with job loss, consumption, economy really not still picking up. So he offers us a roadmap that addresses some of these economic issues, social problems that he feels we need to deal with. The question is, how do you execute? How do you fund this given the fiscal space of government? And maybe we just have to give them credit that they would like to look positive, that they can achieve these things, this long list of plans, agenda that they have laid out, both at the executive and at the legislative level, a long list of legislative priorities that with a super majority, with both houses supporting him, has to move forward as fast as he should demand from the leadership.
And we'll get to a lot of the details on that. But before that, I wanted to ask, how does this differentiate himself from the previous administration? A lot of people have noted no mention of drugs, no mention of crime, no mention of peace and order.
Or the insurgency.
Or the insurgency. What do you make of all of that? Notwithstanding the fact that he ran on a platform also not just of unity but also continuity. He did pay credit to President Duterte on things like infrastructure and so on, but the key platform of Duterte was absent in this.
Where we are today in 2022 reflects the issues that he needs to deal with. And that's basically what he addressed on. Issues of infrastructure, issues of the economy. And that is where you don't have any space to deal with issues of drugs or fighting criminality. So maybe it's his way of focusing on what are the top concerns of Filipinos, and we have data that reflects that. That issues of criminality may be high during the time of Duterte because it was used to set an agenda, but in this case, there are some expectations. And the expectation is that he needs to deal with these economic consequences, where the Duterte government has failed actually. So maybe he's just looking at this as an opportunity to set his own agenda based on what the public consider as a concern, as a top concern, and not what the Duterte has prioritized. So he avoids things that might bring him to some controversial issues, but focuses on, and I always say SONA presidents who do well in SONA tries to talk to the public, not to people like us.
Sir, primary concern ng maraming tao, as we saw, sikmura, pagkain, presyo.
Yes.
Di ba? Was he able to address these issues from your perspective?
He defined a way to address it by speaking of the challenges of the economy and for the government to come up with this fiscal plan. And I feel that the style of President Marcos Jr. is that it will allow, or he will allow his cabinet to define it, to put the details to what he has said.
So his is just
That's how I look at it, yeah.
The vision.
There might be some, if there was a pre-SONA during the time of Duterte administration, remember,
Yeah.
maybe this style now, he sets an agenda, let the cabinet put some substance to it, define it, and that's why I'm looking forward to that fiscal plan. I'm looking forward to that 6-year development plan.
When you say that may nasisilip kang style, a lot of people are precisely saying we don't know his style. We didn't see him speak. He's relatively unknown in the field of being an executive. He's had 2 major speeches, and that's it. When you say that we're starting to see his style, what are you basing it off on?
It's really more of he's trying to communicate not to you, me, but to the general public. It seems to be driven by, I call it data-driven, because it reflects what we track also in our quarterly surveys. So what he mentioned today are things that were defined as issues at the end of June. And that kind, for me, reflects a president who is talking to his public, and his public might reflect on good numbers for him and support for his policies and programs.
Okay, now joining us as well is Professor Jean Franco. Professor Franco, welcome to the Chiefs.
Hello, Robbie. Hello, Ed. Hello, Dindo.
Hi, ma'am.
Professor Franco, after the inaugural speech and the few times that the public has engaged with the president, people have been asking for details. They wanted specific promises. They got the details. They got specific promises. But does that come with risks now that we have so many numbers now to baseline his targets and to measure his performance, I guess?
Yes, of course. But then it's better to have these targets than not to have anything at all. And it is also important for his legitimacy before the business community.
Okay. Pero ma'am, let me go down to some detail kasi there were quite a few announcements that the president made that struck a lot of people as surprising. Among them, his decision to condone amortizations and bad loans dun sa agrarian reform, as well as to donate, I suppose it's donation, 50,000 hectares of government lands, agricultural lands, to various sectors. That, among many other things na gusto niyang paggastosan, specialized hospitals, regional health centers, and so on down the line. And also, as well, build. Ang daming paglalabasan ng pera. I'm warning lang, sir and ma'am, if you think that he was able to establish enough basis to build revenues to fund all these to fund all these projects, all these outgoing revenues.
Well, yes, that's also in fact and I agree with Dindo when he said that saan kukunin yung pera, no? How are we going to fund all these proposals? So I hope they find the revenues to actually realize these programs. Otherwise, they will be, they will not materialize.
Sir, sir. Kasi I understand he talked about streamlining the bureaucracy. He talked about capital taxes and so on and so on. Pero walang masyadong breakdown dun sa how much we can expect from these measures,
exactly.
and whether they will offset all the expenses that they're planned.
I think 2 weeks ago, the DBCC came up with their first meeting together under this new government and defined certain targets of revenue collection, and they seem to be positive. Some might say they're spinning it, but years of knowing Secretary Jokno, I know that he's a person who looks at these problems as positive things that he can deal with. So I look the next 12 months and see how they can really build on it. That's why we have to look forward also to what they submit in Congress as the budget for 2023, how aggressive this would be. Let's look at the so-called right sizing of government, if they can easily execute that fast, and even the budget modernization law that is something that they have championed when they were in DBM in the previous government.
Cash-based.
So if these things move forward, maybe certain projects that could have been achieved in the past, now with focused spending, it can achieve these promises. But something also you have to take note was on the infrastructure, a lot of mention of private sector.
Yes,
I'm inviting,
PPP.
I'm inviting foreign investment, mentioned Public Service Act. So he knows for a fact that on these big ticket items, ODA, we pay for that. Diba? Like what we saw with China. But with these big projects, maybe it's basically saying that we can work with the private sector. And the good thing with some of these PPP projects is that when it's a private sector who goes into it, it's not really taken from taxpayers.
Yeah, I suspect this is related to that. You mentioned the private sector. Kanina rin sabi mo, Dindo, the good sonas are directed at the audience, diba?
Yes,
But
yes.
my question is, a lot of people notice this. It was largely English.
Yes.
It was very technical. A lot of very specific numbers. Who was the audience for this?
You'd see some specific intervention, policy interventions. You know, the audience is really, because the weakness of the administration going into their inauguration was how the world sees them, how business is waiting for certain signals. So I believe they were the targets. But when you've noticed when they put emphasis on something, it shifts to Filipino.
Yes, exactly.
It caters to the core constituency, which is maybe dealing with the 77% of Filipinos who consider themselves as poor or relatively poor. So it's a well-managed and well-produced State of the Nation address.
Professor Franco, you agree that there were some populist sections there, and pagdating doon sa mga yun, biglang Tagalog, di ba? And everybody but by and large the SONA was crafted for a very specific audience.
Yes, that was what I sense, no? Kapag OFWs, kapag yung mga magsasaka, nagfi-Filipino siya. And that tells you that iba-iba yung audience, no? Doon sa kanyang speech. But then, largely, it is a speech for, tama si Dino, no? The diplomatic community, the international community, and also the business community, kasi maybe they have noticed the negative press that they've been getting from international media networks. So I think it's very important for them to also gain legitimacy, not only from the local business community but from the international community.
Marcos claims his administration was able to achieve a, quote, functional government with the best and brightest officials during his first 100 days in office.
We bring the best and the brightest, and we do not look at color in terms of political color. I think we have done that.
Sa unang isang daang araw ni Pangulong Bongbong Marcos, marami ang nakukulangan sa pag-aksyon ng administrasyon sa taas presyo ng mga bilihin.
Kapag naramdaman mo na nagugutom ka na or nawala na ng purchasing power yung iyong pera, it will really resonate into a negative image, especially on the leadership of the current administration.
Your take on the first 100 days of President Marcos?
Well, let's start from his statement to the Manila Overseas Press Club. Sabi niya his main accomplishments are one, that he had got the best and the brightest for his government, hindi ba? And the second, ang government niya ngayon ay functioning. Because he said he's got the best and the brightest. So we'll start. Have you seen the list of the names in the cabinet, at least cabinet level positions? There are about 31 cabinet level positions, and I checked out all those names, and I saw only 13 tops of the 31 who are really the best and brightest for the position. The others have to be chosen on a different metric than best and brightest. Yeah, what you have to do is look at the names and look at the bidding where you can get them in Google, and you will find out So it's not true. Now the best and the brightest he got, that is for sure, are the 4 economic managers.
What about the other part of his assessment na he now has a functional government? I guess that's opposed to a dysfunctional government, ano? So, ano kaya yung, do you agree with that assessment?
No, I do not agree because, I mean, based on the evidence that we see, look at what happened to the shooting of task force. That's not a sign of a functional government. They were at government at odds with each other, and they were accusing each other of lying. Can you imagine? And there are so many other instances. Look at the fact that he does not still have a health secretary. How can that be a functional government when health is one of the biggest crises we have now? As a matter of fact, hindi ba? This administration has extended the state of calamity from COVID from September 22 to December 22. How can that be a functioning government?
Let's look beyond the 100 days. Do you feel at least that the government has gotten some better footing over the 100 days, and do you feel that there is a strategy that's crystallizing that is for the rest of his term?
I am sure that there is a strategy crystallizing because it is going to come out in maybe November, the medium-term development plan. I am sure. The question is whether they are going to implement it. Now, you know, there were mistakes made by the president in his last 100 days. The first mistake was appointing himself as Secretary of Agriculture. The second mistake was not appointing a Secretary of Health. And then, as I said, the emphasis on making political points with the people. The 20 peso kilogram rice, the temporary ayuda to the students, you know, which was badly implemented. But he also gave the students free rides, diba? LRT. First, it was free ride in all the places, LRT, MRT, etc. Then he put it down to only LRT. Why did he put it down to only LRT? Because he was told that LRT is the one which has the most student ridership, and giving these free rides was going to cost too much. So at least he's trying. It's just that he's inconsistent in his behavior. All right? And the fourth, I think, his mistake is the very cavalier disregard of the law. Remember when he said that his case, the case of the Marcos estate of 23 billion pesos should be reviewed? That's a final and executory decision, and he did not recognize that. And the second thing was his appointment of General Faustino. General Faustino just retired in November 21st last year. So he cannot, by law, he cannot accept a government position until November 21 this year. And yet, Mr. Marcos appointed him. He wanted him appointed as secretary. Yun pala, hindi pwede kasi government position. Anong ginawa ni Mr. Marcos? Inappoint niya senior undersecretary. Ang question doon is, bakit hindi ba government position ang senior undersecretary? And no one has latched onto it. And these are little details that tend to show how the president will behave in the next 1800 days.
China wants friendly consultations with the Philippines over the South China Sea issue following the meeting between President Bongbong Marcos and Chinese President Xi Jinping.
The bilateral meetings are really just a kind of getting to know you. And that was the same with our meeting
The two leaders discussed the strengthening of Philippine-China relations, particularly in the sectors of agriculture, energy, and infrastructure, as well as people-to-people connections.
Pilipinas at China dapat daw panatilihin ang friendly consultation sa mga issue sa West Philippine Sea. Ayon yan kay Chinese President Xi Jinping matapos ang bilateral meeting nila ni Pangulong Bongbong Marcos sa APEC Summit.
We spoke a little bit about regional issues, but mostly about the plans that I have for the state visit that I will be undertaking to China in first week of January. So whatever details need to be taken up between the Philippines and China will be taken up then.
Sabi ni Xi Jinping, new chapter in friendship. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, first of all, the timing is important. Remember, Kamala Harris, the U.S. Vice President, is coming to the Philippines, and not only to Manila, she's going to go to Palawan, where most likely there'll be, conversations about enhanced defense cooperation agreement, its implementation. We're now not looking only at 5 bases potentially being open to Americans. Kasama dyan yung Bautista Air Base sa Palawan, na malapit sa Kalayaan, Group of Islands, at saka yung and of course towards the north. But we're looking at potentially even up to 10 bases being open, including some in Batanes area to the north or Cagayan, which is close to Taiwan, because biglang naging super mahalagang Pilipinas sa Amerika dahil we're not only at the front line of the South China Sea disputes, we could be potentially at the front line of a Taiwan crisis in the coming years, or months. So in light of that, I think China wants to get a feel, like, how is it going to be with Marcos Jr.? And as I semi-forecasted 4 or 5 months ago, I said Marcos Jr. will be more like his father than Tatay Digong, right? On foreign policy, right? He's not going to be, bash US, nice to China. He's going to be more like, I'll be okay with US, but I want to be also okay with China. Now, whether he can pull off this balancing for the foreseeable future, let's see. And I want to also watch what China's reaction going to be to Kamala Harris' visit to Palawan and how they're going to paint it. Because if you're China, you're still feeling the river and the stones there. So you don't want to also directly attack the Marcos administration this early on. So for me, I think Xi Jinping just wants to feel that things can remain on an even keel, even if Marcos is rapidly revitalizing our defense relations with the United
Cleve
States.
and Robin, was President Marcos in the same mode of feeling out lang muna to, tansyahin lang muna natin how he reacts to whatever words, whatever we say?
Well, yeah, President Marcos accepted the invitation of Xi Jinping to go on an official trip to China in January 3. So I guess it's also quite important for Philippine-China-US relations. So while Kamala Harris is coming next week, right, and the Philippines accepted that visit, going to Palawan, in one of the bases, right? It's not just near the Spratlys, but it's one of the bases that was agreed upon in the EDCA, right? So that's quite important to look at. But this visit also comes in the very important geopolitical moment where Xi Jinping just won his third 5-year term. And if he was aggressive in the last 10 years, we don't know how aggressive he'll be in the next 5 years.
We already had scenes of it inside the country.
Correct.
Yeah. I'd also like to point out kind of like the domestic dynamics of these changes in foreign policy. We as Richard and Robin said, we see that the foreign policy of President Marcos will be quite different from the previous administration. So this is not going to be friendlier towards China, but an attempt to balance the relationship between US and China and the Philippines, more like the Marcos Sr. administration. And I think it's quite important that we see that the Vice President, for example, Vice President Sara, during the time that President Marcos was in the US and announced that, he's willing to work with Washington closely and kind of like pivot back to this traditional relationship with the States. So you have the Vice President Sara Duterte also releasing a video of congratulating the anniversary
in Mandarin.
In Mandarin. There was an
or whatever you call that.
I think it's not an accident. It's by design that there's this kind of balancing within the administration itself. So we know that the Duterte policy, the Duterte coalition is kind of closer to China. So I can imagine that Chinese officials are also watching the domestic political developments between how internally this coalition between Marcos and Duterte will also affect the foreign policy of the country.
We were talking last night to Professor Banlawin, sabi nga niya, it was a chance for both sides to size each other up
Exactly.
in person and possibly to set the tone for January, for next year. But yun nga, it comes after Duterte, which was wildly on the other side of the spectrum. So how do you think President Bongbong Marcos struck Xi Jinping, and how will he recalibrate, if he has to at all, his position towards the Philippines?
Yeah, I know Richard has written about this. I think President Bongbong Marcos' foreign policy is quite a clear shift away from the Duterte foreign policy. For example, the DND just announced today, or I think yesterday, the $60 million investment of the US that they accepted to expand and really actually continue the EDCA that was struck during the Aquino administration. So in that sense, in fact, the continuation of the EDCA is more similar to the foreign policy of Aquino than it is to the foreign policy of Duterte. But I mean, we definitely have to caution. Which is quite ironic, right? So we shall see how Bongbong Marcos will try to balance China and the US. But it's still not a return to pre-Duterte, to Aquino.
No, but it's neither nor, no? I mean, under the reformist liberal president, we had a much more US-centric, democracy-friendly foreign policy. Under Duterte, was much more China, Russia-friendly. Marcos is neither nor, right? It's completely different synthesis. And you could even argue that he kind of owes that to Duterte, because what Duterte did was, President Duterte was able to reset the terms of our relations with the US, make it more transactional, right? Art of the deal, Trump style. So that makes it easier for Marcos to come in and renegotiate the relationship on terms that are more mutually beneficial and balanced. Because let's be honest, we were taken for granted by the Americans back in the day. Let's be honest. Like when Obama was here in 2014, twice he was asked by our friends in the journalism world, are you going to be with us in the Scarborough Show? And he kept on giving lawyerly answers. No offense to our lawyer friends. But now it's different, right? US is very clear. If there's an attack on your vessels, on your troops, your military personnel in West Philippine Sea, the MDT will be applied. So President Duterte inadvertently, I don't think that's because of the genius of it, inadvertently made the Americans realize the Philippines cannot be taken for granted. So President Marcos Jr. is operating from a better leverage position. Nonetheless, the big other problem also coming from the Duterte administration is what I call the pledge trap. Everyone said there'll be debt trap. China invests, malunod tayo sa utang. Sabi ko, where are the investments, right? None. Like, no serious investments from China. So I think Marcos Jr. wants a much more results-oriented relationship with China. It's like, you want, bring it, show it to me, and give us good deals, because the Indonesians got the...
Show me the money.
Show me the money and good interest rate money, not just any money. Because the Indonesian under Jokowi got very good deal from the Chinese, 1% interest rate on that Bandung-Jakarta projects. We're getting, what, 3.5, 4%?
But do you think everything is grounded and formulated already well enough for President Marcos to keep him from swinging, wildly between... as we said, the time frame for this is not just APEC. We're expecting... He's going to be visiting China, but that's after Kamala Harris comes here. There's a danger if that policy, if that is not actually a strategy, and it's not well formulated and grounded at this point, that he'll just be swinging wildly and feeling his way between these two powers.
I think you can be tactical, situational for quite some time, because we're in the midst of many massive changes. Let's not forget the Bali détente, when Biden and Xi met and kind of said, okay, we're inevitably going to have competition, but pare, wag naman tayo all out, kasi it doesn't serve any of us. And both presidents were coming from a strong domestic position. Biden's party did way better. The best since JFK, as we discussed, as far as midterm elections is concerned, in the first term. And of course, Xi Jinping secured. Third term, not really won. So if you're the Philippines, you're also looking at the big picture of the giants, and then you're adjusting. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. You cannot just be tactical, situational. Nahikisakay na lang sa trend. Dapat meron ka ring sariling coherent policy down the road, and it's not going to be easy. I want to be fair.
But again, back to that question, Cleve. If it's still tactical at this point, and you have some time to be tactical about it, does that answer the question that, well, kasi wala pang well-formulated policy and strategy?
In fairness to President Marcos Jr., he's made a very good appointment in his foreign affairs secretary. So we also trust that the entire foreign policy bureaucracy has a strategy in dealing with these two powers. But I can also imagine that Marcos will also be tempted to like do this kind of like swinging tactical swings that you have been mentioning, because let's not forget this foreign policy is being performed by the president who just years ago is not really welcomed and embraced by the international community. So he's re-entering, and it's quite surprising actually how warm and how receptive the international community has been to Marcos Jr. For example, even President Biden, U.S. President Biden, was part of the committee that declared the snap election during the time of Marcos Sr. as fraudulent, for example. So I think that kind of personal baggages of President Marcos, he's now able to make foreign trips. He's now able to visit these countries that before he couldn't really. I mean, he can now represent the Philippines again and talk about the legacies of his family in running the Philippines. That will definitely affect as well the character of foreign policy and in dealing with both China and the U.S. where I think we see that both powers are trying to court, talagang nililigawan si President Marcos, right? Sending the highest delegations possible, rolling out the red carpet in his visits, and we're likely to see that happening in the coming days as well.
That's it for this special edition of The Chiefs. I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Luchi Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.